Hello and good morning, or good afternoon, whenever it is that you might be watching. Welcome to our Bible study. Rounded up a few of the usual suspects, and
Here comes Roger.
oh yeah, right on time. So anyway, hello Ruth. I understand you already watched the one we did last week. So and you really wanted to see the others who are here. So I am going to make sure that you do that before the morning is out. Okay, whether they like it or not. So we are going to be looking at Genesis 37 and 50. So it's kind of a unusual pericope this time with what we might think of as bookends to the story. There's
Roger.
hello. We're just getting going. And so as bookends, we're beginning in 37, we're ending in 50, and there's 38 through 49, quite an expanse of the story that we won't have time to cover. But so last week we were hearing about Abraham or Abram and Sarah. So who wants to share, or who feels confident to say what has transpired since then? Abraham and Sarah had who was a child? Isaac, yes.
Okay.
The boy whose name means laughter. So Abraham and Sarah had Isaac, and then Isaac had
Jacob
and
Esau.
Jacob and Esau. So when the Hebrew people say, when Moses goes and it has this encounter with God in the burning bush, and God says, "Go to Pharaoh, let my people go," and he says, "Well, what am I supposed to tell them? What is your name?" And God actually has two names. One being, "I am who I am," which is this great mystery. What is that? What kind of name is that? What does that mean? But the other one is, tell them that the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has called you, or, that is my name. So, Jacob and Esau, but Jacob had a number of sons. And as we'll find out, this was a dysfunctional family. And do any of you have any experience with dysfunction in your family? Yeah. At some point, yeah, exactly. We don't have to go into detail. We're not here for therapy, but
I thought maybe we were going right into the confession here.
Anyway, so the other name for Jacob, though, is
Israel.
Yes, very good.
I've been reading some Bible handbook.
All right.
I want to read after a while about the family. It's really interesting.
Good. So Geraldine is here along with Dorothy, Roger, and Ed Waters, and we think maybe Julie Brunkhorst will be joining us. We're not sure about anyone else. But so with a little bit of background, we know now kind of where we're at with chapter 37. And I will read the first couple verses, and then we'll get into it a little bit more. So, chapter 37 of Genesis. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. Oh, you're not late at all. We're just getting started.
Good.
More or less. We just did a little bit of background. Hello, Julie. So this is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Hey, Don.
How long are you going to be?
Hour? Yeah, we'll be done at 11:30.
Okay.
So what do you notice so far? Anything stand out?
Joseph must have been a tattletale or something.
Yeah, sounding that way. He says he brought a bad report to their father.
But then maybe he wanted his father to know what was going on.
Yeah,
No.
either that or he got sick of them guys picking on him all the time.
Yeah, that could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 17?
Mm-hmm.
And his
Okay.
brothers probably were older, you suppose, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because they were born to.
Yep. So, who'd like to continue at verse 3? Because our on our narrative lectionary sheet, if any of you, oh, sorry about that. Mom, Dad, can't take the phone right now. So on this sheet, we actually begin with verses 3 through 8. So why don't we read at least 3 and 4, which continues to sort of help set the scene.
Now, as it happened, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other children, because Joseph was born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob gave him a special gift, a brightly colored coat. His brothers, of course, noticed their father's partiality and consequently hated Joseph. They couldn't say a kind word to him.
All right.
That's it.
What do you make of that?
Typical jealousy in the family.
Sibling rivalry?
How come he got it and I didn't?
Can't get along?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there another sibling rivalry that we remember earlier in Genesis? Not that we've studied it.
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel.
Abel, yeah.
What happened there?
Well, they got right down to the real thing there.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
that was sad.
Cain
Got him.
slew Abel.
Yeah.
And of course, then Cain had this mark, so he wasn't killed with punishment of death, but he says this punishment is worse than death. You know,
Yeah.
so very severe consequence. So here again, now we have another sibling rivalry, and it's not just two brothers, but a whole band of brothers. Do you think Israel or Jacob has reason to show favoritism, or is that always wrong and out of bounds?
Well, I read in my Bible book here
Yeah.
that Joseph was the son of Rachel, and she was the wife that he really wanted at first, but he had to have Leah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Joseph was born, he was kind of a favorite because Rachel was the one that he
Was the mother of it, yeah.
was his mother, yeah.
So that's a great point and a factor. Here it says because he was the son of his old age,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
you
that's
might
true.
take pride in that
like
too.
Grandfather having a little one.
Almost, yeah, right.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. I'll make it
Yeah.
short, but
Yeah.
I was the oldest one on that side and on my mom's side. And of course, my mom's brother was like in high school at that time.
Mm.
And so I would go there and stay a lot, and there was that jealousy factor there, I'm not going to go into any more details, but I mean, just because he was the only son, but I was the first grandson. And,
Yeah. There was a story I remember reading, an interview of this woman who had just a whole bunch of kids, 12 kids or something, and they said, well, how did you love them all? I mean, is it possible that you love them all equally? And she said, no. I love the one who needed loving the most. At that, if one
At
was
that time,
sick,
yeah.
then I took care of that one, and the others, had to understand that my love is partial in this time or in this moment for that child's sake. And well, anyway, I always kind of remember that story and think, oh, that's a pretty interesting response on the part of that mother. But the thing that your Bible made a point of, Ed, and mine is a little bit different. He had made him, meaning Dad, had made Joseph a long robe with sleeves. And it says the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So is it that he made him a special robe with sleeves, or did he make him a robe of many colors? Now, some would say, well, what difference does it make? It caused jealousy either way.
Yeah.
But one thing that is kind of interesting is a long robe with sleeves. I kind of wore something that, colorful or whatever and has these sleeves, would indicate that he's not to do a lot of hard work. Because what do you do when you got to do hard work? You wear short sleeves, or you're sleeveless, like these boys on the mission trip or whatever. They're like, we need a pair of scissors, and they're cutting off the sleeves so they can show their muscles and flex, and get some sun. And they'll say, sun's out, guns out. They'll be pointing at their big muscles. But anyway, so a long robe with sleeves would say, I don't even want you to have to labor hard. And the other thing that is really interesting is, which we don't really think about or understand, is back then every piece of clothing was unique. It was like one of a kind, right? You didn't just go to the store and look at the rack of countless items and say, ooh, I like this fabric, or I like this color, or this pattern, or this, So the fact that he goes out of his way to make him a long robe with sleeves, and maybe it was of many colors. Well, how are you going to get many colors? Again, it has to be special dyes, maybe imported from India or some other parts of the world. So it's a big deal, and you can see how the brothers would feel jealous. And it says they hated him. Okay? Well, it only gets worse from here, we might say. Who wants to pick up in verse 5?
Okay, one night Joseph had a dream and promptly reported the details to his brothers, causing even deeper hatred. Listen to this, he proudly announced. We were out in the field binding sheaves, and my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves all gathered around it and bowed low before it. So you want to be our king, do you? His brothers derided. And they hated him both for the dream and for his cocky attitude. Then he had another dream.
No, that's good. We'll stop there. Thanks. So the second dream is just as bad if you're one of the brothers. All right. So, what kind of a person do you think Joseph is? The Living Bible that Roger said, he's cocky. Okay? That's one interpretation. And it seems like a logical one. But that's
boastful.
Boastful. What else?
I think he's a little, I hate to go total defense of him, but I think he's a little naive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
He's the youngest one, and I think he wants to impress his older brothers. And so he's talking about, the thing, and he means it that way, I think, more so than, they come right away and say, well, you want to be king, But I think he just wants to be accepted, and that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he probably feels kind of favored because of that robe. There isn't too many people got these robes.
Right.
And he probably figures, well, I'm kind of special.
So,
Yeah, I guess you could, really, when you look at it, you can interpret it a lot of different ways, you know.
yeah.
I was just, yeah,
Sometimes we talk about, is it nature or is it nurture? Was he naturally inclined to be this cocky, brash, full of himself kid? Or was it that dad, by presenting him with this, brought that out in him and made him think I'm all that in a bag of chips, It's like, well, again, he has this dream, and he immediately tells it to his brothers, which causes them to hate him even more. So what about the dream? I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah.
About the stars and the moon
Well, that's the next one. Do you want to read that one? Go ahead.
on channel
9 and
9. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars are bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his father rebuked him and said, what is your dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept his matter in mind.
Mm-hmm. So this one ups the ante even more, right? Because now it's mom and dad and the 11 brothers are all bowing down to you. Like, hold on there, son. This may be a bridge too far, even for dad who loves you dearly. His father rebuked him. And yet, verse 11, but his father kept the matter in mind. Like, maybe this isn't just a kid who's way bigger than, than his britches or whatever. Maybe there's something to this. Because of course they believe that dreams, visions, these are things to pay attention to. A lot of times we have a dream or maybe a vision, and we just dismiss it right away because it's like, well, I don't know what that was. That was just weird. I mean, you wake up and you go, pfft, and you kind of toss it away. Well, back in these days, even the father says, I better not throw that away entirely. Maybe there's something to that. Okay. But it also indicates some kind of future for him and the family. Right? So I think while the brothers are very jealous and whatever, I think the dad is, we might say, he's going to ponder that one for a while. Okay? So I'll read quickly the next part, and then again, if you look at your sheet, we pick up at 17b. But his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. He answered, here I am. So he said to him, go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers, he said. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock. The man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So, again, this is interesting, because at the beginning of the chapter, Joseph was shepherding the flock with his brothers, and now that he has this lovely coat of many colors or long sleeves, he's staying back with Dad. And Dad says, oh, maybe you should go find them, and then come back and bring me word. So, again, it might be creating further animosity, or maybe the brothers were like, hey, punk, you stay back. We're going. We don't want you around. Okay. So, anyway, at 17b, they said, let us go to Dothan. All right, so somebody want to pick up there? Geraldine, maybe?
They had moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan, is that our grandson?
Mm-hmm.
But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father.
Okay, thanks. So we'll pause there at 22. All right, what's the plot? The plot thickens, right?
Plot thickens.
Mm-hmm.
Covering their tracks.
Well, they have a plan, and they also have a plan to cover their tracks. Yeah. So, Geraldine, yours says they plotted to kill him. Mine says they conspired to kill him. So we all hear about conspiracies, right? And the root of that word, do you know what that actually means? Think of the etymology of the word. To conspire, or to spire, spirit, breath, and then conspire means like you and I together, we're going to whisper back and forth, and that's our conspiracy. Our spirits are together, our breath, our plotting, you know. So conspiracies are not good. You know, I mean, things should be more transparent. Things should be in the open. You don't conspire if you have something that, you know, that's only when you want something hidden, the truth to be not known. You have a conspiracy. So even from a distance, they conspired to kill him, and they said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him. So there isn't any one particular brother named initially, right? It's just they, and they, and you know, they. Let us do this. Then we shall say, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams. Okay. So who sort of steps in and thinks, I'll maybe try to be the hero in this case?
Reuben.
Yeah. You like Reuben sandwiches?
That's the first thing I saw.
I don't. Anyway, Reuben.
Well, he's the oldest, so maybe he felt more
Oh, is that right?
responsible
Oh, okay.
or whatever. I don't know.
He wants to do the right thing. I mean, he's not strong enough to stand up to them entirely, but he at least stands up to them to the extent that he says, oh, come on, we can't kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Let's just throw him into the pit without killing him. Well, I don't know. To me, it's like, would that mean a slow, miserable death? You know? Well, then he says, well, I will come back and I'll basically rescue him and restore him to the father. Now, what does that mean for Reuben? If he was able to carry out that act, what would the rest of the brothers think? We don't know, obviously, but he had good intentions. So how many of us sometimes have good intentions?
Yeah.
that we don't actually follow through on.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I gotta take credit for that.
Yeah, yeah. So these are, I mean, these are people who are seriously flawed individuals, and yet, as we'll read toward the end of chapter 50, God is working through all of this mess of this family for good. All right, I'm not the only one who's phone ringing.
Oh. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. No.
So it ends that lay no hand on him, that he might later, rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. Well, it didn't quite, he wasn't able to do that. Because I'll pick up in 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore. And they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So again, he would be there likely to die, even though they didn't kill him. Their intent is basically the same. They then sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, carrying gum, balm, and resin, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, so I'll Julie, do you want to read there?
No,
or
I don't have a Bible, I've got a different kind of book here, so.
Oh, you got a handbook instead?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we could get you a Bible if you want.
No, it's okay.
All right. Well, let's come back around to Ed then. We want to pick up at 26, please.
Look there, Judah said to the others, here comes some, whoever you guys are. Let's sell Joseph to them. Why kill him and have a guilty conscience? Let's not be responsible for his death, for after all, he is our brother. And his brothers agreed. So when the traders came by, his brother pulled Joseph out of the well and sold him to him for 20 pieces of silver. And they took him along to Egypt.
Okay, pause there. Well.
Change of heart.
Now, I read something that's interesting in the handbook here. That Reuben was the oldest, so he couldn't inherit because he had done something he shouldn't have.
Okay.
And then the next two sons also had not been too good. And so Judah was the one that he thought maybe he would eventually get to be the top dog.
Oh.
Is that right? That's what it says in here. That's why he didn't want to kill him. He didn't want to be responsible for that. So that's why he suggested that they sell him instead.
He would.
Looking forward.
It's really interesting, yeah. I mean, let us instead sell him, not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And the brothers agreed. So they must have all had some second thoughts about this whole thing.
Yeah.
First of all, Reuben is saying, let's shed no blood.
Yeah.
And now Judah is saying, maybe this isn't such a great plan. Yeah, we hate him. Yeah, we're angry. And yet, there's still some basic decency, you might say. We won't murder him. But selling him off gets him out of our lives and out of our hair. And plus, gosh, we get 20 pieces of silver. Now for a couple pieces each, just about.
Is that the same amount that they paid?
Yeah.
Yes,
Judas, no, it was 30 pieces.
I
30,
read
huh?
somebody said it was $12.50 in our day.
It was how much?
$12.50.
Oh, really?
That's what, where did I see that? I saw it here someplace.
I don't know.
Maybe it was in the bottom of my Bible.
If that's all it was, they didn't cut
They
a very
didn't
good
get
deal.
much. Of course, no, you can't compare that anyway.
Meanwhile, you wonder what were the Ishmaelites thinking when they like drag their brother out of a cistern and say, "Here, you want to buy this thing?"
So you
This
think they would have
brother-
owned up to that?
Yeah, maybe they were still far enough off that they didn't
Yeah.
see all that going on. Anyway, Roger, why don't you pick up for us, if you would, at 29?
Sometime later, Reuben, who was away when the traders came by, returned to get Joseph out of the well. When Joseph wasn't there, he ripped at his clothes in anguish and frustration. The child is gone, and where shall I go now? He wept to his brothers. Then the brothers killed a goat and spattered its blood on Joseph's coat, and took the coat to their father and asked him to identify it. We found this in the field, they told him. Is it Joseph's coat or not? And their father recognized it at once. Yes, he sobbed, it is my son's coat. A wild animal has eaten him. Joseph is without doubt torn in pieces. Then Israel tore the garments and put them on sackcloth and mourned for his son at deepest mourning for many weeks.
Okay, we're just going to go through 34. So, Reuben, for whatever reason, somehow, didn't realize that they had sold him off. And he can't be the hero. So he tears his clothes, which is a sign of anguish or, great sorrow, grief. And they end up going back in some ways to their original conspiracy, or at least the cover-up, which is they slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood, and brought it back to the father. So even though Joseph's not dead, he's taken from his father, and he has this moment of anguish believing that he's been killed, which is really awful when you think about what are these sons doing to their father by making him believe his favored son is been taken by wild animals. I mean, even though they didn't kill him, they must have still had a whole huge burden of grief. Or sorrow, or guilt. Okay. So that's the portion of 37 that we look at, and then we leap all the way to the end of the story, as I said. Now, anybody know some of a quick summary of what happens in between? Have you seen the musical or read this enough?
I've never seen it.
You haven't seen Donny Osmond on stage? He was on Broadway and played Joseph. Basically,
He gets to be ahead of where he is now and gets, right, Joseph, I mean.
he gets to be kind of chief slave to
Yeah.
Potiphar.
Yeah.
And what happens there in that
yeah.
house? Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph.
Yeah, yeah,
And he is like, I want no part of this.
that's right, yeah.
But she entices him.
Yeah.
And
It's always the woman's fault.
no, Ed, don't you dare go there. But Potiphar's wife is not a good person, and she does set him up and says, look at how your servant treated me. And and then Potiphar throws him into prison. Okay, even though it was a complete setup. In verse 39, or chapter 39, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. It's one of the only times I think in these whole 13 or 14 chapters that God's involvement is specifically mentioned. I'm not certain about that, but anyway, so he's in jail, and guess what? There are dreams of prisoners, and he ends up interpreting their dreams. Next, it's discovered or found out that Pharaoh is having dreams. But none of Pharaoh's people can interpret the dreams. So somebody says, well, there's this guy who's in prison who can interpret dreams. And he says, well, summon him, right? This is tormenting me. So Joseph is called. He does interpret the dreams. Pharaoh believes the interpretation is correct, since no one else knew what the heck they were about. And then Joseph rises to power. There's a famine, but part of the dream was that Pharaoh and Egypt would know the famine was coming, so in the 7 good years they stored up grain, and then the whole region was dependent on Egypt for their food because the famine was so severe. And Joseph is Pharaoh's right-hand man. So Joseph's brothers come to Canaan. They go to Egypt. They get some food. They return to Canaan. And Joseph kind of sets them up. Says, you have to come back with Benjamin. And Father Israel is like, no, I already lost my dearly beloved Joseph. I don't want to lose Benjamin also. So Joseph is kind of playing with them. They don't even know that it's their brother. I'm sure because he looks totally different. He's grown up and he's in this place of power, and it's the last place they would ever expect him to be. Any other thoughts or reflections on this? In chapter 45, the heading on mine says, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. Chapter 45, verse 4, and Joseph said to his brothers, come closer to me. They came closer. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. All right. In verse 7, it's reiterated, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. How many of you, if you suffered something as great an injustice as Joseph would be able to, would you feel like, oh, I could be gracious toward them? Who had wronged you so severely? Would you just be like, oh yeah, time heals all wounds?
Well, of course, many years have passed, so maybe time heals all wounds, is that the word?
Yeah.
You know, the thing of it is what you said, many years have
You think
passed.
about it.
And look at the position he
Yeah.
is in. I mean, he's got the world by the tail right now where he's at. So, yeah, maybe he could be a
And he
little...
probably missed his brothers
Yeah.
all these years too, as far as that goes. I mean, even though they did get rid of them, but I don't know. Yeah, it could be that way.
It's pretty, it's pretty amazing, I think, in many ways, because many other people hold on to grudges and
Oh, yeah.
mistreatment for their entire life. I mean, I sometimes shake my head when I hear people say, well, I don't go to church anymore because such and such happened, or so and so said something, or that pastor that they had. And I'm like, yeah, and when was that? Oh, that was like 30 years ago. Oh, very good, yeah. It's like, have you ever heard of forgiveness? Have you ever thought about maybe giving someone or some group of people, church, a second chance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. I mean, it's kind of like, just call them out for it. Like, you're being unforgiving just as they were to you, okay? I mean, you're going to hold on to the grudge or the whatever. And so I think in some ways, one of the phrases that I've heard for Joseph, and I think it's kind of helpful, is you can either be a victim or a victor.
That's a good one.
Now, which is, it's up to you. Bad things happen to everybody all the time. Some of us go on living as a victim. Everything, everyone. I'm just going to blame the rest of the world. It's never me at fault. It's everyone else. And I'm just a victim. People do that, and do we tend to have a lot of respect for them?
No.
I get tired of that. That plays out really quickly. I think for most of us, we go, all right, I've had bad things happen to me too, but I don't go around wallowing in misery misery loves company, of course. You gotta, sometimes you vent and you are frustrated and you need to, get it off your chest or whatever. But to constantly just sort of live there, it's like you sort of imprison yourself. And here Joseph was freed from prison, and he, went on to do tremendous things, and God worked through him. But he was, as we heard from the very first verses we looked at, he was no saint. I mean, he was kind of a brash jerk,
Ben Franklin said in Poor Richard's Almanac, to err is human, but to blame someone else is even more so.
Yeah. Another thing I've heard is that leaders will fix the problem rather than fix the blame. I mean,
That's a good one.
it's so easy to fix blame. There's always enough to go around. I mean, again, go back to Adam and Eve in the garden. What do? Immediately they start pointing fingers at each other. Well, you made me do it. No, you made me do it. I mean, it's like...
No, I don't know how many times as a teacher I heard it's not my fault. Yeah, he did it too, so that makes it okay. He threw the paper, so it's okay that you threw it, even though I told you not to do it.
Yeah. He started it.
So I'm not to blame.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go to the very end. We don't have too much more time. Chapter 50, verses 15 through 21. So there's this poignant scene of forgiveness. Dorothy, do you see that chapter 50, verse 15?
Okay. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we have done to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left your instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers in sin and wrongs they commit in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. Keep going. His brother came to him and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. I am in the place of God.
No, am I?
God.
It's a question.
Yeah.
Oh.
Am I in the place of God?
You intend to harm me, but God intended for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So them, don't be afraid. I will provide you for your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Okay. So a dramatic closing scene of this saga. And what do you make of the brothers here?
They don't sound like they want to celebrate anything. Sound like they're all just kind of walking away with their tail between their legs.
Yeah, I mean, they're finally humbled,
Yeah.
it sounds like. And they're maybe terrified. I mean, because he has all the power. He holds all the cards, basically. What if he still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?
I think the thing that I picked out or I noticed is how Joseph becomes more enlightened into his religion or into his life. He seems to be more forgiving, and as the whole thing progresses is what I'm saying. Even at the end, he's very forgiving. And then being that he lives in Egypt, which from what you see on my shows, that's not the most religious place. You know what I'm saying? They believe in all these other gods and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think that's quite unique in a sense that that his religion stood out like that, and
Yeah.
it's just a thought.
Yeah, good one. And I think sometimes when terrible things happen to us, again, how do you respond? Do you go deeper into your faith, or do you reject your faith or throw it out the window? Like, well, I thought because I believed God would never have this happen to me. You know, I mean, again, play the victim or just realize, you know, God's been with me all through it all, through the valleys of the shadow of death. I thought it's interesting, the brothers almost still seem a little bit conniving about, we won't ask for forgiveness, but we'll say, Dad, we'll call on Dad's name in his death, that he was the one who said, Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. You know, it's kind of like, are they truly repentant? Are they, I don't
They just
know.
feel that their chances are better by going through Dad.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it kind of seems that way to me. But
if he was going to be angry or hold a grudge, he would go right for them, you know. And by putting Dad into the picture, well, that,
But don't you think, being that Joseph came out of this so good, I mean, and that, you know, what he all did, he was probably more able to forgive than if he would have been.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
No. He had a really good life. God, so I don't know.
yeah.
That might add some bearing on it too,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Right. I mean, at that point, he's like, what good is,
Yeah.
how am I going to feel better if I exact revenge?
Yeah.
You know,
Right,
it's
that's
like
the point. Yeah.
all these terrible things happen, but
Turned out good.
if I turn on my brothers now, it's the only family
And
I
then
have.
his religion plays part in there too, because he you know, this is leading up to the way God wanted it to be, and set the program in focus. So,
Yeah, verse 20, even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good,
yeah.
in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. Now, who are the numerous people that are being preserved through Joseph's actions?
Well, these people had famine and they went to get food from Egypt.
Right.
Or where he was.
So, I mean,
So they were.
God's people are being saved, but
Yeah.
who else is being saved? The Egyptians.
Oh, sure.
You know, these ungodly people
Yeah, that's
are
right.
also benefiting tremendously from Joseph's action of interpreting the dream, and then they get prepared for this, and so I think it's kind of interesting to reflect on that God uses people to do good things for people that are not in our circle of, or not part of our family, or not part of our tribe, and are we okay with that? Or do we resent that? Do we get angry at God? You're supposed to only look out for our interests. What are you doing, God? I mean, it's like, but God is God, right? So anyway, through it all, God works for good. And it's kind of interesting. Again, I hadn't thought of this till I heard it read, but the brothers fall down before him and say, "We are here as your slaves." It's like the prodigal son who goes away, comes back and says to dad, you don't have to take me in as your son. If I could just be one of your slaves, I will be all right with that. So it's, again, some of the stories that we look at in Genesis, here in the Joseph story, bring us back to the garden or back to Cain and Abel. But then there's also the ones that sort of throw us forward. Anyway, I said that I would share with our people who are watching on YouTube who all else is in the room. So there's Ed. And across the room is Julie. The lighting isn't that great there, but
Hi, Ruth.
Geraldine
Hi there.
and Roger. So hopefully,
Does Bob get involved in that over there?
I'm thinking so, but I didn't talk to him,
Yeah.
and I only posted this a couple days ago and sent the link to Doris. So, but I did ask her to share it around, so I guess we'll have to check in with them and see. But let's close with prayer and be on our way. Well, God, we give you thanks for these opportunities to study your word, to learn more about ourselves, to learn more about these people we sometimes call heroes of the Bible, but we realize that they are flawed people just like us. And yet you use them to bring about good in the world. So in the same way, we pray that you might use us in whatever ways that you see are suitable and right here in this community, in this congregation. Help us to strive to live as victors because of what Jesus has done for us, what you have done for us by giving us grace and forgiveness, and not live as victims because we all know that there are difficult, terrible things that happen, but you are with us there, present, even in our times of imprisonment or times of walking through the valleys of shadow of death. So watch over us, guide us, in Jesus' name. Amen.